Last week, my son, who's 9 years old, we were informed as the parents, myself and my other half, that my son was going to be learning the first phase of sex education at 9 years old. Now, for you older guys out there, older parents, you'll probably remember that we learnt it in secondary school, not primary school. He's not even at the end of primary school. So obviously I didn't think this was a good idea. So I actually ended up taking my son out of school that day so that he didn't have to be subjected to something he's not ready for, and I consider him to be too young. Later on, we found out that many of the other children there were disturbed by what they saw. They were in tears. They weren't ready for it. I mean, it wasn't the full-on sexual education, but it was leading up to it. And it's interesting because the school wrote us an email back saying that, we're going to put this unauthorised leave and you can't do that. They need to learn it. So I wrote back and I said something that to me is quite obvious. I said, well, the values with our family start at home. The school is secondary, not the primary source of learning for their values and how to live their life. No school wants to hear that because there is a societal trend that's probably existed a long time, but it's quite prevalent now, I feel, is that they want to let you know that the school is actually where it all happens. The government tell you how to raise your children, they tell you what's best. But clearly, what we're looking at, anyone that's looked at the political kind of system over the last, long period of time, we can see they clearly don't. They can't even control themselves and what they do, so they certainly can't tell us what we should be doing with our children. But what's interesting is that I really saw conformity and obedience in its purest form, with many of the teachers saying you cannot question, we just have to do what we do, we're doing that classic term, we're just doing our job. How many times has that been used in history, that terminology? And these are good people. They are good people. I know them, and the school's brilliant. In most cases, it's a very good school. But it just shows that a lot of people put their values to one side in order to conform and the fear of not fitting into the system of what might happen. We certainly don't live in a time at the moment where we can live that way. And that's really become apparent with what's going on around us, where there's never been a bigger cultural divide between politicians and the people they supposedly serve, which if you're switched on in any way, you'll know that they don't. I've mentioned it before. Thomas Sowell once said, politicians are there to solve their own problems and their friends, not the public. Anyone that doesn't understand this doesn't understand politics at all, which is a really revealing thing to say. So I would encourage every father, specifically the father, to choose how you want your children to be raised. Don't feel threatened or fearful to question what the children are being taught, because I saw a lot of kids that weren't ready for this last week. They clearly weren't. And it's not until we made a strong stance about how we decide the values in our own home and what they're subjected to, that we actually ended up getting a lot of respect for it from everybody. But my concern is that I was the only father in the class, the whole class, that took his son out. That's a tiny percentage. And I know that some people wanted to, but they just couldn't muster the courage to do so. And so having chatted to them, their response for their sons and daughters that were a bit disturbed by what they saw was, we'll have a chat with them next time to prepare them for it for the following morning. But it's still conformity. It's still obedience. And you can't be courageous if you're going to conform and be obedient all the time. You can't. And you will start to embrace the worst aspects of yourself and normalize them. So it's not a free place to go down. It's not a safe place to go down. So I think that now is the time more than ever to look at everything around us and decide in our home what's right for our children and stop passing on. There's an irresponsibility to this as well, to consider that it's other people's opinions and choices to decide how our children are raised and what they're subjected to. That's really irresponsible. That's not really proper parenting. You should make that decision yourself. If a parent made a proper decision that this is the right time for them to learn sex education, so be it. But I don't think that's the case. I think in a lot of cases, parents were too frightened to question the school, what's going on, and no one ever sits down and says, what's the motive behind this? That was my thought. What's the motive behind dropping that age from about 11 or I think it was about 11 years old down to 9 years old, 11, 12 years old. I think I was 12 when I learnt it. Down to 9. I thought, what's the motive behind that? Because it's clearly not for the children. So what is the underlying foundation of thought underpinning this that giving that to 9 year olds? I don't think it can be anything good. I don't think it's anything beneficial. Once we understand, as Thomas Sowell said, the government are sorting out their own problems and the problems of the people they serve and not the public, we start to get an idea, okay, well, what's the motive? Who are these people? We can't just assume that they have our best interest. I think that's a pretty naive way of thinking now. And it's not the teacher's fault because they have to teach what they're told to teach, unless of course they move on and decide not to do it and they make us take a stance, which I would like to see actually, if I'm honest, at some point in time. But yes, I wanted to just voice to everyone, specifically the dads again today, is that you be aware of what your children are being taught. Be aware of what ideas your children are being subjected to now, because it's not because they care about them. The teachers in the school will do, no doubt, but the people that they've got to implement those ideas, they won't. So you must be aware of what's being taught, because the more people that turn around and say no, these things can't go through. The only way anything in life can be accepted by the masses or implemented and normalised is if the mass of public do it themselves. It's the only way. It's not any government officials that can actually decide that this is the way it's going to be. They have to rely on a mass group of people accepting it as normal. So we have far more power than what we think, and we forget that. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind, because the Courage Project, Unlimited Courage, is going to be rolled out quite strongly now, and no doubt we'll get some resistance. But the underlying message is there, is that live from courage, make it your primary aim, not just in your career. Anybody can do that. Not just in one part of your life because it's comfortable and you feel a deep desire to arrive at some sort of point where you consider yourself successful, but all of your life. I meet many successful guys, very wealthy guys, lovely chaps. It's been a pleasure to coach them, but they're really disconnected from what their children are being taught. And the ideologies they're being indoctrinated into, they're completely separate from, because they're so intent on just going down this one pathway of personal success. But as I said in the audio, the high performance life, it is a life, it's a lifestyle, is to look at all of your life and make sure that your children are not being indoctrinated by other people. And just be aware of what's going on, be aware of what they're watching. Be aware of what you watch as well. What's going on in the home? What's going on at school that could actually, or what's going on at school and outside the family home that could come back into it, that's not too healthy. It's not right for them. It's not right for the family. These are things we just start paying attention to far more closely. Because this idea that everybody around us is working for the good of humanity is total nonsense, and it takes extreme naivety to believe that. So it's the man of the house, the man of the family, even if you're a young man in the family, still play your part, is to be responsible for what's coming into the household that could be harmful. And that way we get to change not just our family home, but we get to change our society with it.